Hey guys, welcome back to another KMAC Science Pod. Today, we're actually going through the Masala study. And the reason why we're doing that is because it's the most directly applicable study to you guys. And let's kick off. Sam, what is basically Masala study?
Yeah, so the Masala study is essentially a cohort of US-based South Asians from San Francisco, Bay Area, and also Chicago. Near enough equal split of men and women in there. And essentially, like I say, it's a cohort of US-based South Asians, which multiple studies have then been conducted on.
Yeah. So, Archana, let's talk about South Asians and the risks. And, we've seen so many things regarding health over the last 25 years plus. What do we know about South Asians and health in general?
So what we've most oftentimes found within the South Asian community is that most people suffer a lot from cardiovascular disease, a lot more compared to other minorities. And there's a couple of reasons for this that we can just say off the bat without necessarily looking into a study per se. There is higher sort of visceral fat. That means that, and there's actually a phenotype that's different too. It's out there already. It's called TOFI, so thin outside, fat inside. That's what they classify it as.
Yeah.
And then what that means to say is that because of that, you have a lot more sort of visceral fat that's going to impact your chronic illness. And eventually what will happen is that your cardiovascular risk increases, diabetes, etc. We see more of that. And taking it back to sort of the cultural level and why we see more of that is down to the type of foods that people eat, what they're used to, the cultural element, and more so looking at the South Asians in America, pairing that together with the American diet. And I think it's just exponentially gotten worse from an intake perspective. That's not helped anybody to improve their health. And that's kind of what we've seen so far, I would say.
Yeah, if you look at South Asians have actually moved across everywhere in the world. So you've got South Asian, you'll have pockets in Australia, you'll have pockets in East Africa, then you have pockets in the UK, even Ireland, Scotland. Then you've got loads in obviously in America as well. So there's a culmination at the moment where and we consume the Western diet, right? The amount of South Asians that we speak to, and even our clients right now, they're not I want to just have, Indian food every single day. A lot of times it's I don't mind having this. Can I fit in maybe Chick-fil-A for this day or whatever? There'll be a factor where it's we are still influencing a lot of the Western diet as well, and at the same time. And also you pair that up, historically, we've never been big on exercise either as well, right? And South Asians have now, I'd say since I've known more South Asians maybe in the last 10 years get into health and fitness. But before that, when I was a kid, growing up, I didn't see that many were going to the gym. I didn't know anything about the gym then. Athletes, you just knew cricketers, and that was pretty much it. But they were just in India, right? But also, they weren't genetically blessed, right? You'd still have a doughy Batman, and then you're what's going on here? So it's a weird situation. Bowlers, they'll still be a bit doughy. So I think, as a combination as well, exercise plays a huge role in all of this.
Also, I feel what's happened over time is everyone's ability to move naturally has diminished a lot. We're a lot more stagnated. We're seated for long hours. People's works have changed from talking even back to the industrial era where everyone's on their feet. They're doing something. You're constantly active. We're not as active anymore as a human population. But if you narrow it down even to the South Asian community, we are not very active. We are a lot more stagnated, and I think that also has a huge play into what health sort of repercussions we're experiencing now is essentially.
It goes both ways actually. I'd say previously, let's say in the 70s, 80s, even if it's the Industrial Revolution and everyone's standing up and it's physical, they'd still overconsume based on that. And then nowadays as well, it's availability of options. So it's can I Uber Eats right now? And I'm yeah, actually, I can Uber Eats and I'll just get this.
Yeah.
You're not going to think about, can I get something that's high protein potentially either, right? And that's where obviously where we come in and we've made things work within can you do something Chick-fil-A, Sweet Green if you're in New York, or whatever the place is, we can make it work. But D, conclusions on the actual study as well. For you right now.
Yeah, so this initial first study in question is the adherence to the Eat Lancet Planetary Healthy Diet, which essentially it's a diet that is good for the planet, but also is also good for human health as well. So just give you a bit of an insight into essentially what it is these group of individuals were kind of placed in quartiles or quintiles based on their consumption of certain foods. So, for example, the food groups were eggs, fish, nuts, legumes, soy foods, unsaturated fats, saturated fats, and added sugars. And essentially, they're broken down into quintiles based on a food frequency questionnaire. And then from here, essentially what we can do is we can kind of model and predict like a score, like a planetary healthy diet score. And then from there we can like assess risk. So essentially what we did find in that is there was reductions in cardiovascular disease risk factors and reductions in type 2 diabetes risk factors from individuals who were in the highest to the lowest quintiles on this model, looking at these different food consumptions essentially. So there was two kind of major things that stood out to me when I was reading it. One is there was a subsection which was a prospective cohort study, which is essentially, it sits kind of higher on the evidence hierarchy because there is this temporal component to it where we actually are following individuals up over time. So it's not just like another form of the study was a case control. Or essentially what we're doing is we're doing some sort of like a cross-sectional analysis, where we look at one variable and another outcome. So we look at like insulin sensitivity and eggs, and we see that these two things correlate together, as opposed to with the prospective cohort, we're actually following these individuals up over time. And what we did see is, even though there's less kind of weight being placed in the cross-sectional analysis, we did see like them increases in type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease risk. But then when we followed them individuals up over time, some of them risk markers in the prospective cohort study was nullified. So there was no real like statistically significant results there. And what I believe explains this is because what I truly believe is like that Eat Lancet planetary diet, I believe that is something that does reduce cardiovascular disease and diabetes based on all of the previous research we have on the area.
Just South Asian, for example.
Yes. So South Asian and just humans in general.
Yep.
But the major thing that pops up here is the levels of exposure and trying to find an effect. So for example, like if you're comparing a group that has 16 grams of egg a day versus a group that has 10 grams of egg a day, it's a bite of an egg. Half a bite of an egg, 5 grams. Like trying to be able to find any kind of result when we don't have that kind of big exposure contrast is always going to be really, really difficult to do. And we find that across like all of these food groups. So whether it's fish, like here we're looking at 6.5 grams in comparison to 17 grams. Again, 2 bites. It's not something that's enough to actually detect any degree of an effect. So what I do actually suspect is that like if we had individuals, or if this was a bigger pool of individuals with more diversity, and we've seen lower groups versus higher groups. So we've seen something like individuals consuming 10 grams of fish a day versus 100 grams of fish a day. That's when we know its effect. And that kind of applies to all of these kind of food groups here. So I believe that the results of the like lower type 2 diabetes risk and cardiovascular disease risk would be true. They're just not going to be found given the lack of difference in these individuals in the study.
Interesting. So this is episode 1.
This is episode
and we're
1.
going to go through different episodes and we'll still break it down over the next couple of series. So stay tuned, guys, and see you in the next episode.